Emily Parker never imagined that signing a stack of legal papers inside a quiet Virginia courthouse would become the most transformative moment of her life. Yet on that icy February morning, when the sky hung low and gray over Arlington, and the world smelled faintly of winter salt and tired pavement, she walked out of the building with tears burning behind her eyes, her breath fogging in the cold air as she tried to absorb the finality of the judge's words. The words that officially ended her 13-year marriage to Michael, a man she had once believed she would grow old beside, though for years the love they shared had withered slowly, quietly, like a neglected houseplant drying beside a window nobody bothered to open. She had married him at 26, young, hopeful, dreaming of a life filled with laughter, Sunday breakfasts, road trips to national parks, and a home full of warmth. But instead, she found herself spending most nights alone, sitting at the edge of their bed with a book she couldn't concentrate on, while Michael worked late, traveled constantly, or came home irritated, distracted, and emotionally distant, offering her the kind of affection that felt more like duty than love. And though she tried endlessly to salvage what they once had, planning date nights he canceled, cooking dinners he forgot to come home for, leaving gentle notes in his suitcase when he traveled, nothing softened the hardening of his heart. And eventually, Emily realized she was living in a marriage where love had been replaced by silence, kindness replaced by resentment, in partnership, replaced by two strangers sharing a home yet living entirely separate lives. The moment she decided she couldn't do it anymore was not dramatic or explosive, but painfully ordinary. A Tuesday evening when she had made his favorite dinner, grilled salmon, lemon asparagus, and wild rice, and he walked in 40 minutes late, didn't apologize, didn't kiss her hello, didn't notice the table she had set with candles and fresh flowers, and instead said, "You didn't season the salmon enough," before taking his plate into the living room and turning on the TV, leaving Emily standing in the kitchen with her hands trembling and her heart sinking under the weight of all the years she had swallowed her feelings, convinced herself to stay, convinced herself that every marriage goes through rough patches. But that night, as she stared at the flickering candlelight reflecting in her tears, something deep within her whispered, "You deserve more than this." And the whisper grew louder over the next few weeks, pushing her to find the courage to say the words she had feared for years. "I want a divorce." The months that followed were a whirlwind of emotional turbulence, long therapy sessions where she admitted the loneliness she had buried, phone calls with her supportive sister Olivia, who reminded her she was brave, and quiet nights lying awake in the guest room, wondering if she was making a mistake. But deep down, she knew she was choosing survival, choosing healing, choosing herself after years of being invisible. And though Michael didn't fight her on the divorce, he didn't offer closure either, moving through the process with a detached coldness that confirmed what her heart already knew. The marriage had died long before she gathered the strength to end it. When she finally moved out of their shared townhouse and into a small but bright apartment in Reston with hardwood floors, tall windows, and a balcony overlooking a sleepy little park, she felt both terrified and liberated, her new space echoing with the silence that, for the first time in years, didn't suffocate her but welcomed her, invited her to breathe, to rebuild, to rediscover the woman she had lost somewhere between compromise and heartbreak. The first few weeks alone were difficult. She cried while assembling her furniture, cried the first morning she woke up alone, cried when she unpacked a box of old photos. But each tear was part of a cleansing, a quiet unburdening, and slowly she started finding pieces of herself again. She joined a yoga class on Saturday mornings, began journaling every night, painted her bedroom a soft sage green, and filled her kitchen with fruits, fresh bread, and the sense of new recipes she cooked not for someone else, but for herself. She started taking long evening walks around the neighborhood, watching golden sunsets melt over the lake, letting the crisp air touch her face. And she noticed how much beauty she had missed over the years while living in the shadow of a marriage that no longer nourished her. At work, she began thriving again, her coworkers noticing the newfound spark in her presentations, the confidence in her voice, the way she no longer rushed home to sit in silence beside a man who barely acknowledged her presence. And when her boss offered her a promotion to lead the communications team, a position she had been too scared to apply for during her marriage, she accepted it with a trembling excitement, feeling for the first time in years that she was capable, talented, and destined for more than simply surviving. As months passed, Emily discovered new passions she had never let herself explore before. She joined a book club on Saturday mornings, learned pottery at a community center, visited farmers markets on Sundays, baked banana bread for her neighbors, and even adopted a sweet rescue dog named Bailey, who filled her apartment with joy and wagging tail enthusiasm. And every day she felt the quiet strengthening of her spirit, the gentle rebuilding of a self-worth that had been chipped away piece by piece during her years with Michael. She wasn't looking for love, not yet, not while she was still learning to love herself. But life has a way of surprising you when your heart is finally open to healing. And one late summer afternoon, while waiting in line at a local coffee shop, she met someone who would later change everything. A warm, soft-spoken man named Jordan, who accidentally bumped into her and spilled a splash of iced latte on her shoe, apologizing with such sincere embarrassment that Emily burst into laughter, a sound so unrestrained and genuine that even she was startled by it. Slowly, she found herself smiling more often, sleeping peacefully, and waking up with a soft glow in her chest she thought she had lost forever. One autumn weekend, Jordan invited her on a scenic drive to Shenandoah National Park, and as they hiked through trails lined with fiery orange leaves, breathing in crisp mountain air, Emily felt a quiet surge of gratitude for the woman she had become, a woman who had survived heartbreak, loneliness, self-doubt, and fear, a woman who had walked away from a life that no longer nurtured her. A woman who had rebuilt her world with strength, courage, and compassion. At an overlook where the valley stretched beneath them like a painting, golden fields, rolling hills, the soft whisper of distant wind, Jordan took her hand softly, without expectation, and Emily felt a peace she hadn't known in years, a peace that assured her she was exactly where she needed to be. And in that moment, she realized that the divorce she once feared wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning, the painful but necessary turning point that freed her from a life of quiet suffering and opened the door to healing, independence, joy, and a love that didn't hurt. Looking out across the mountains, with sunlight warming her cheeks and her heart steady and hopeful, Emily whispered to herself, "I'm proud of you," because she finally understood, deeply, undeniably, that the divorce did not break her. It saved her, rebuilt her, and changed her life for the better in every possible way. Months after Emily whispered, "I'm proud of you," on that mountaintop, her life continued expanding in ways she never thought possible, unfolding like a sunrise that kept stretching brighter and wider with every passing day. And though the world still threw challenges at her, work stress, unexpected bills, the occasional memory of her past marriage that stung like a bruise pressed too hard, she navigated everything with a strength grounded in self-trust, a strength she had grown slowly and painfully, like a muscle rebuilt after years of strain. She found herself growing closer to Jordan, not in the dizzy, breathless way she once associated with romance, but in a steady, grounding way that felt like the gentle warmth of a fireplace on a cold evening, comforting, safe, and deeply human, the way love should feel when it's rooted in respect rather than obligation. And though she took her time, she began letting him into corners of her life she had kept guarded. sharing the music she used to listen to alone, inviting him to farmers markets where they laughed over crooked pumpkins and taste-tested homemade jams, letting him meet her dog Bailey, who immediately adored him, and slowly trusting that joy didn't always have to come with heartbreak hiding behind it. One evening, after a long workday, she invited Jordan over for dinner in her apartment, and as they cooked together, chopping vegetables, laughing over his terrible attempts at whisking sauce, dancing barefoot on her kitchen tiles while an old Billie Holiday record played, Emily realized she was experiencing something she never had in her marriage: simplicity, comfort, presence, love without tension. And as they ate dinner on her balcony under the soft glow of string lights, with crickets humming from the park below, she felt a peace she hadn't known in years, a peace that assured her she was exactly where she needed to be. And in that moment, she realized that the divorce she once feared wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning, the painful but necessary turning point that freed her from a life of quiet suffering and opened the door to healing, independence, joy, and a love that didn't hurt. Quiet warmth in her chest at the sight of him admiring the stars, as if he had never seen anything so beautiful. And she realized that love didn't need to be dramatic or chaotic to be real. It could be gentle, steady, healing. Exactly what her heart needed after years of wounds. But life, even in its beauty, doesn't pause its hardships. And in early spring, Emily received a call that shook her. Her mother had suffered a mild stroke, leaving Emily terrified as she rushed to the Richmond hospital, her hands trembling on the steering wheel, her mind spiraling with fear. And during those long days in the hospital, sitting beside her mother's bed with machines beeping softly in the background, she felt the weight of loneliness creep back in, despite her progress. Yet Jordan showed up for her in a way she had never known a partner could, delivering meals without being asked, sitting beside her quietly when she needed silence, holding her when she finally broke down at 3 a.m., whispering, "You're not alone, Em." And she knew in those moments that love wasn't proven through grand gestures, but through unwavering presence during the darkest hours. When her mother finally recovered enough to return home, Emily returned to her life a little more tired, a little more grateful, and a little more aware of how precious time truly was, which made her cherish even the smallest pieces of her days. The latte she sipped by the window each morning, the way Bailey curled at her feet while she worked, the soft text messages Jordan sent to remind her to breathe, the quiet hum of the world continuing around her. As summer unfolded, Emily felt more grounded than she had in years, thriving in her job, nurturing new friendships, hosting brunches, exploring hiking trails she used to fear doing alone. And one warm July evening, as she and Jordan watched fireworks burst like bright flowers over the Potomac River, he took her hand in his and whispered, "I'm proud of the life you're building." And instead of shrinking, instead of brushing the compliment away as she once would have, Emily squeezed his hand and let those words sink into her bones, because she knew they were true. She was building a life, piece by piece, with strength and courage, one far more beautiful than the life she once clung to out of fear. By autumn, Emily found herself doing something she never imagined, speaking at a local women's support group, sharing her story about leaving a marriage that had slowly dimmed her light, telling strangers about the nights she cried quietly, the therapy sessions that rebuilt her, the ways she rediscovered herself. And as she stood in front of 40 women with tear-filled eyes, she felt a rush of purpose wash over her, realizing that her pain had transformed into something meaningful, something that could help other women who were still lost in shadows she had once lived in. And after the meeting, when several approached her with trembling voices saying, "Your story gave me hope," Emily felt something bloom inside her, a sense of mission, of healing, not just for herself, but for others. By winter, her relationship with Jordan had deepened into a soft, steady partnership. And though they didn't talk about marriage yet, Emily wasn't ready and he respected that. They built a foundation made of trust, communication, laughter, space, and honesty, the kind she never knew existed. And one snowy December weekend, while they decorated her apartment for Christmas with mismatched ornaments and cinnamon-scented candles, Jordan paused, looked at her with a tenderness that made her heart flutter, and said, "You don't have to be afraid of happiness anymore." And in that moment, surrounded by twinkling lights and warmth, Emily believed him. The coming year brought even more transformation. She traveled with friends, started a side project helping women leaving toxic marriages, and on a crisp spring morning, as she stood on the same Blue Ridge overlook where she had once whispered, "I'm proud of you," Bailey by her side and sunlight painting the valley gold, she realized she had finally stepped into a version of herself she had never known was possible. Confident, independent, joyful, deeply alive, a woman who understood her worth, honored her past without letting it define her, and embraced her future with hope rather than fear. And as the wind brushed her cheeks, she whispered again, this time with a steady, full heart. "Thank you for leaving. Thank you for choosing yourself. Thank you for surviving." Because the divorce that once shattered her didn't break her story. It rebuilt her, awakened her, and became the doorway to a life far more beautiful than anything she had lost.